If this little girl truly has money in her account, I'll pay her double right here and now. The taunt rang under the marble dome of Blackwell Bank's Fifth Avenue flagship, stilling the room, until the revolving doors swept open and history stepped through. If stories of healing, redemption, and justice speak to you, stay with us, and please subscribe so you won't miss a single chapter of what follows. Morning laid pale bands of light across the lobby, turning the marble floor into a quiet sea. Clerks moved like figures in a chapel, screens glowed, stampers clicked. Then sound thinned, attention tilted, and every face drifted toward a single child at the counter. Anna Blackwell stood on tiptoe, Teddy tucked in the crook of her elbow. 6 years old, ribbon blue as winter sky, she slid a sleek black card across the polished granite. The branch manager, Victor Maroro, turned the card between his fingers as though its weight offended him. His smile was meant for spectators, not for her. A cough, a nervous laugh somewhere in the line. Anna's fingers worried the bear's ear. She heard the voice she trusted most. "This belongs to you now. Walk in, don't bow," and let her chin rise the smallest measure. Victor fed the card to the terminal. The screen blinked. A printer half hidden behind the counter coughed out a receipt and settled into its hum. He touched the paper, and his face, that practiced managerial face, forgot the act. The numbers did not fit his script. A hush rippled. Anna did not know the shape of zeros or why they could make a man's hand shake. She only knew when a room believed or did not believe her. For the first time since stepping inside, she felt the balance begin to tilt. The revolving doors whispered. Footsteps crossed the stone like a metronome. Donovan Blackwell came in without entourage, a gray at the temples that made the navy suit seem sterner, not softer. The air around him altered, not theater, gravity. He went directly to Anna, placed his palm on her shoulder, and met her gaze first, the room's second. "This card," he said, his voice low and clear, "belongs to my daughter." Victor found half a sentence and lost it. The crowd found its phones. Security drifted closer, uncertain whether to form a shield or vanish. Donovan didn't look at them. He looked at the people who had watched a stranger shrink a child for sport. "To those who witnessed this," he said, turning to the lobby, "I owe you more than a private apology, and less than a spectacle. I owe you a public remedy. This building bears my name, it will not bear contempt. What happened will be answered in the open." A murmur, then clicks, then the soft, inevitable roar of outside life converging. Sirens farther up Fifth, the cough of a camera's motor, the furtive shuffle of reporters through the doors. The story had left the counter and found a stage. Anna's hand found the back of his. She did not understand markets or reputations, but she understood posture. The way her father stood, not in front of her like a wall, but beside her like a promise. He bent close enough for only her to hear. "You did exactly right." Victor shifted, hunting for an exit that wasn't there. If there was pity for him in the room, it stayed silent. He had smirked his way into a tribunal, and the tribunal had excellent lighting. Donovan guided Anna a few steps to the base of the interior stairs. The risers broad and shallow like a dais, unintentionally built for moments precisely like this. "No one here will be named and shamed by me today," he said. "The process will do that if it must. But hear this. A customer's dignity is not a variable expense. It is our first cost of doing business." A reporter's voice carried from the door. "Mr. Blackwell, are you saying this is bigger than one manager?" Donovan did not hesitate. "I am saying it is never only one moment. Something authorizes a sneer. Something allows the laugh behind it." He turned his head slightly toward Victor, not to scold him, but to measure him. We will find that something and remove it. He was not grandstanding. He was building the first plank of a bridge he would later be forced to cross under fire. Policy, audit, daylight. But in this minute, it was simpler. Father, child, a counter where a line had been crossed. "Sir," another reporter pressed, already recording, "are you promising firings? Lawsuits?" "I'm promising transparency," Donovan said. "If accountability requires firings, there will be firings. If it requires reform, there will be reform. If it requires both, we will survive both." The phones angled higher. The lobby, once a place of choreographed quiet, had become a court of first instance. A guard moved toward the door to slow the tide of cameras. Donovan lifted a hand. Let them come. He did a small thing then, a thing no press release could have taught him. He crouched to Anna's height, so the lenses caught not just a chairman correcting a ledger, but a father aligning his eyes with a child's. The picture would travel farther than anything he said. "Ready?" he asked her. She nodded with the gravity of children who haven't learned to be coy. "I wasn't lying." "I know," he said. "We're going to live like the world knows it too." He rose and for the first time addressed not the lobby, not the staff, not even the crowd, but the institution itself. "Blackwell Bank will never again confuse balance with worth." The sentence landed. Some in the room didn't like it. Numbers prefer to be sovereign, but most breathed out as if a window had been opened. Victor found his voice at last. "Mr. Blackwell," he stammered, "this is being blown out of—" "Enough," Donovan said. Not sharp, simply finished. "You will step back from your duties while we examine this entire branch's practices. You will be treated fairly. You will also be held to a standard you failed this morning." That was as much spectacle as the moment would bear. He took Anna's hand. "We're going outside," he told her. "There will be questions." "You don't have to answer any." "Can I hold Teddy?" she asked. "You can hold Teddy," he said, and the smile in his voice tamed the lobby a degree. They walked toward the doors. The crowd parted, strangers making a small corridor as if they'd remembered, all at once, how to be decent in a public place. On the counter, the receipt with its long, inelegant proof of solvency lay like a fallen flag. No one touched it. Outside, Winter waited with the appetite of news vans. Red and blue strobes threw color over the steps. Microphones lifted. Questions layered on questions. Donovan didn't wave them off. He stopped on the second stair, set his shoulders against the wind, and let the world witness his yes. "Effective immediately," he said, voice steady enough to quiet the weather. "I am suspending all individuals implicated in this incident, pending an independent review led by outside counsel. The findings will be public. We will establish a channel, open to customers, employees, the anonymous and the brave, where complaints can be filed without fear of retaliation. We will publish a timeline. You will be able to hold us to it." The crowd altered its posture. Less hunt, more listen. Behind the lenses, some faces softened. Accountability spoken in declarative sentences can do that. From the edge of the press pack, a familiar profile shouldered in. Richard Hayes, chairman of the board, coat immaculate, expression stormed over. He should have called, but power often prefers the stage it didn't build. "Donovan," he said, not into a microphone but to the man. "You are gambling with shareholder value." Donovan didn't bother to lower his voice. "I am investing in something without which shareholder value is counterfeit." The line would be quoted 1,000 times, praised and mocked in equal measure, which is to say, it had entered public life. Anna tugged his sleeve. "Are we done?" she asked, in the way only children can rescue a moment from becoming sermon. "We're done for now," he said. "The rest is grown-up paperwork." They stepped down to the sidewalk where the city offered its neutral mercy. Cold air, the smell of exhaust, the clatter of a bus a block away. The doors behind them sighed shut. Inside, a counter waited to be relearned. Outside, a story began to outrun the building that birthed it. By evening, the lobby would resume its measured choreography. Deposits would post, vault doors would whisper. A custodian would find the printed receipt and feed it to a shredder without knowing he was erasing a museum piece. None of that would undo what had lodged in the city's imagination. A 6-year-old with a bear, a man who decided not to flee from the light, a sentence about dignity that would echo in rooms unaccustomed to moral acoustics. On the ride home, Anna fell asleep against Donovan's arm, the card safe in his jacket pocket. The bear's stitched smile tilted toward the window. He watched the buildings pass in mirrored strips and thought, not about spin or damage control, but about rules he had taken for granted. How many rooms had he entered where certainty felt like air? How many times had he asked people to breathe it without offering any? He touched Anna's hair with his free hand. "Tomorrow," he said to no one in particular, "we start over." That night, while the city scrolled and argued, while headlines tried out their verbs, a draft email began to take shape on Donovan's screen. Not a press release. Those have edges too smooth for repentance. A promise with dates on it. Names of firms he would invite to examine his own house. A line at the top that would read, simply, "We will not fix this in secret." He didn't yet know how wide the circle of consequences would grow, or that strangers with burner phones and spliced audio would soon test his resolve. He knew only the thing that matters at the beginning of anything worth finishing. What kind of man he intended to be when the lights were harsh and a crowd demanded to know. He closed the laptop. In the next room, a small pair of shoes, scuffed from playground gravel, waited by the door like punctuation. The test had begun. The marble steps of the Fifth Avenue branch were never meant to carry this weight. For a century they had held bankers and brokers, polished shoes and briefcases. But now they sagged under floodlights, microphones, and a crowd thick enough to slow traffic. Donovan Blackwell stood halfway up the stairs, Anna's mittened hand curled in his, the red scarf Margaret had wrapped around her neck tucked high against the chill. The bank loomed behind them, its columns pale in the gray morning, but Donovan wasn't looking at the building. He was looking at the rows of cameras waiting for him to blink first. Anna tugged at his coat. "Do I have to talk?" she whispered. "No," Donovan said gently. "You've already done more than enough. Just hold my hand." She squeezed once, and that was answer enough. Margaret, ever steady, stood at the flank with a clipboard against her chest. She caught his eye, nodded once. The room is set. The world is listening. Donovan stepped forward, Anna's hand still clasped in his, and faced the wall of lenses. "This morning," he began, his voice low but clear enough to carry, "my daughter was mocked in a house that bears our name. That is a failure I own, but I will not repair it in a back office or with a signed check. We will face it where it happened, out here in the open." A rustle spread through the crowd. Some reporters jotted quickly, others simply held their breath, waiting. "Effective immediately," Donovan continued, "I have suspended every employee involved pending investigation. An independent review has been commissioned with full authority to examine practices across all branches. Their findings will be public. A timeline of that investigation will be released by February 15th, and a channel, open to customers, employees, and whistleblowers, will accept complaints without fear of retaliation. This is not a gesture. This is policy." The murmur swelled, reporters whispering to editors, camera lights flaring brighter. Then, from the side of the crowd, a familiar voice cut in like flint striking steel. You're endangering shareholder trust, Donovan. Richard Hayes, chairman of the board, had forced his way to the rope line. His silver hair gleamed beneath the lamps, his coat immaculate. He had not planned to speak, but his temper carried him onto the stage. History had built without him. You cannot run a bank by apologizing on the steps like a politician, Hayes said. His voice carried, sharp and dismissive. Our shareholders want stability, not contrition. Gasps darted across the press pool. Cameras swiveled to catch the tableau. Two titans of finance split in public, one with a child at his side, the other with fury etched in every line of his face. Donovan did not raise his voice. He only looked down at Hayes, his words deliberate. Shareholders invest because customers trust us. When that trust is mocked, the stock itself is counterfeit. We answer to people before we answer to numbers. The line landed. Phones went up to capture it. A small burst of applause rose from the edge of the crowd, not from reporters, but from bystanders who had stopped on the sidewalk, drawn by the noise. Hayes stiffened, realizing too late he had given Donovan a foil instead of a foe. Margaret stepped forward, clipboard tucked under her arm. We'll circulate the investigation timeline by end of day, she told the press, her tone crisp. Full transparency, nothing hidden, nothing sanitized. Donovan inclined his head to the reporters. Hold us to it. If we fail, tell the world. If we succeed, tell the world louder. Questions fired in a volley. Will there be firings? Are systemic problems deeper than one branch? Will Blackwell Bank cooperate with regulators? Donovan lifted his hand for silence. Yes, yes, and yes. It was the brevity that made the room lean closer, scribble faster. Anna, half hidden by his coat, looked up. Are we done now? She whispered. Donovan bent low enough for only her to hear. Almost. He turned back to the crowd. This is the beginning, not the end. Blackwell Bank will no longer weigh its worth only in balance sheets. From this day forward, dignity is our first dividend. The applause this time came louder, steadier. The press pool, unaccustomed to clapping, looked awkward, but the bystanders on the street carried the sound until it echoed against the stone facade. Donovan guided Anna back toward the doors. Hayes remained rooted at the rope line, jaw locked, knowing that by speaking, he had widened the crack in the boardroom for all the world to see. Inside the marble lobby, Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced down, her brow furrowing. She tapped Donovan's sleeve and passed it to him without a word. On the screen glowed a new email, sent from an anonymous account. Subject line, Blackwell hides more than you think. Attached, a single PDF. Donovan read the first line, half accusation, half threat. He slipped the phone back into Margaret's hand, jaw tightening. The lobby was just the beginning, he murmured. The boardroom at Blackwell Tower was a theater without velvet curtains. Mahogany table polished to a mirror, a skyline of Manhattan beyond the glass, and a ring of men and women accustomed to ruling by consensus or by silence. But not today. The emergency meeting had been called less than 24 hours after Donovan's speech on the steps. The memory of flashing cameras was still fresh, the hashtags still trending. Hashtag respect over wealth had climbed to the top of the financial feeds, while the bank's stock chart pulsed red and green like a restless heartbeat. Richard Hayes sat stiff at the far end of the table, his tie knotted tight, voice sharper than the winter wind. You humiliated this institution in public, Donovan. Shareholders don't want transparency, they want stability. And you've traded one for the other. Murmurs rose. Some board members nodded. Others avoided eye contact, their screens open to the live ticker instead of their notes. Donovan leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes steady. I didn't humiliate the bank. The lobby incident did that. I'm repairing what's broken before someone else decides to do it for us. Hayes slapped a hand against the table. Repairing? You suspended a dozen staff overnight and handed our future to outside lawyers. Do you understand what it means to invite outsiders into our vaults? Yes, Donovan said evenly. It means the truth will survive discovery. That sentence cut the air. Margaret, seated behind Donovan with a notebook, glanced up, catching the way cameras embedded in the ceiling blinked green, recording every word for corporate archives. A younger board member, Patel, cleared his throat. With respect, Mr. Hayes, our customers have never had a louder voice. If we bury this, we risk regulatory intervention, class action lawsuits, perhaps even federal oversight. The chairman's approach may sting, but the alternative could be catastrophic. Hayes turned on Patel, his expression a mask of practiced disdain. Spoken like someone who's never had to calm a shareholder call. Donovan interjected, voice calm but ironclad. We're not here to debate the PR cycle. We're here to decide containment or reform. Which side of history will this board occupy? Silence deepened. The question framed the choice too clearly. Patel broke it. I move that we suspend Victor Marrero pending investigation and that we form an independent Ethics and Culture Committee composed of external members. Their authority must be real, not symbolic. Several heads turned sharply. Margaret's pen scratched across her pad. Hayes's jaw flexed. You want us to hand the reins of this bank's culture to strangers? No, Patel replied steadily. To experts, and to the people we serve. Arguments unfurled like storm clouds. One faction, aligned with Hayes, insisted on containing the scandal, limiting statements, silencing staff. Another, led by Patel and quietly reinforced by Donovan, pressed for structural reform. The vote was called. One by one, hands lifted. Hayes tallied silently, eyes narrowing as momentum shifted away from him. The resolution passed. Victor suspended, the Ethics and Culture Committee established with authority to access internal documents, interview employees, and publish findings. Hayes leaned back, his smile thin and cold. So be it. But when this costs us billions, don't say I didn't warn you. Donovan didn't flinch. If dignity costs us billions, then dignity was overdue. The sentence would headline the Wall Street Journal by morning. As the meeting adjourned, Margaret handed Donovan her tablet. On the screen, live social feeds pulsed. #respect. Overwealth had been joined by another tag. #worth is respect, sparked by a clip of his stairway speech. Public sentiment is swinging, Margaret murmured. Markets swing faster, Donovan replied, glancing toward the ticker crawling across the news screen at the room's edge. Shares dipped, rallied, dipped again. Then his phone buzzed. A message, unmarked, anonymous. Contain it if you dare. The tape drops tonight. Donovan's grip tightened. He didn't need to ask which tape. The war was moving to another battlefield. By the time night fell, Manhattan's skyline glowed like a circuit board, every tower lit with the pulse of industry. But in the penthouse office of Blackwell Tower, the light came only from a single desk lamp and the cold glare of Donovan Blackwell's phone screen. The anonymous message had not been idle. At 8:17 p.m., the Chronicle pushed a breaking alert across every financial feed. Leaked audio implicates Blackwell chairman. Within minutes, the recording spread across social media. The grainy clip was less than 30 seconds long, a male voice unmistakably like Donovan's saying, "Bury it. Profit comes first." News anchors replayed it on loop, pairing the words with images of Donovan on the marble steps with Anna, holding his daughter's hand. The contrast was too perfect for headlines to resist. Margaret burst into the office, tablet in hand, her face drawn tight. It's everywhere. Hashtag spiking. Hash profit over people. Hash Blackwell cover-up. Stock already sliding in after hours trading. Donovan played the clip once more, listening with narrowed eyes. The cadence was close, the gravel in the voice uncanny, but something was off. The hollowness between syllables, the clipped rise and fall of a digital stitch. "It's a fabrication," he said flatly. "Convincing enough that no one will wait for proof," Margaret replied. He rose, pacing to the window. The city's lights blurred in his reflection, fractured by rain. He had fought regulators, competitors, and boards, but this was different. This was war waged with shadows. "Then we prove it false," he said. "Spectrograms, ENF analysis, metadata checksums, the full forensic arsenal." Margaret nodded, already typing. "I'll get Adrian Keller. He's the best audio forensic specialist in the country. But even if he clears you, the damage is here. Now." Donovan turned back, steel in his eyes. "Then we fight now, publicly. Tomorrow morning, press hall. Live broadcast. I want Keller on stage. If they attack me with lies, we'll expose the mechanics of their fraud in front of the world." Margaret hesitated. "That's bold." "It's survival." By dawn, the bank's press hall swarmed with cameras. Reporters jostled for position, microphones bristling like a field of pikes. Anna remained at home under heavy guard, her teddy by her side, blissfully unaware of the storm her father now stood against. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Donovan stepped onto the stage, Margaret and Keller at his flanks. He adjusted the microphone, gaze sweeping the restless crowd. "You've heard the recording," he began. "You've heard me condemned by words I did not speak. Today, you'll hear the science." Keller clicked his laptop, and the projector filled the wall with jagged bands of color, spectrograms. He explained each: the splicing artifacts, the ENF mismatch, the checksum inconsistency. Words like metadata corruption and fabricated waveform alignment flashed across screens. "This recording," Keller said firmly, "is fake. No court would admit it as evidence. No analyst should treat it as truth." Gasps rippled, cameras snapped. Margaret leaned toward her mic. "This is not just about one man's voice. If such forgeries stand unchallenged, any leader, any citizen could be destroyed with a sound file. That's not accountability, it's anarchy." Donovan's voice followed, steady as stone. "If the truth costs me power, I accept it. But lies will not rule these halls. Sunlight is the cure. We will fight this, not in whispers, but in daylight." The words trended within minutes. #sunlight is the cure. For a fleeting moment, the tide shifted back. Applause even broke out among some of the reporters, unusual for a press room. But then, Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, blood draining from her face. She turned it toward Donovan. A text message, untraceable. "If we can't destroy the father, we'll destroy the child. Watch your gates." Attached was a blurred photograph, Anna's school uniform, taken from a distance. Donovan's jaw locked. He pressed the phone flat against the podium, hiding it from cameras. He leaned into the mic one final time. "This press conference is adjourned." The hall erupted in chaos. Questions shouted, cameras flashing. But Donovan had already stepped off stage, Margaret at his side, Keller hurrying to keep up. In the private elevator, Donovan's fists clenched white against the rail. His voice was low, volcanic. "They've moved beyond me." Margaret gripped his arm. "Then you protect her, with intelligence, not rage." The doors slid shut, sealing them inside. The war had shifted again. It was no longer about stock prices, reputations, or even forged tapes. It was about Anna, and Donovan Blackwell had never been more dangerous. The elevator chimed, its steel doors sliding open to the 13th floor of Blackwell Tower. Donovan stepped out with Margaret close at his shoulder, his face a mask of fury. The anonymous threat still burned in his pocket, the blurred photo of Anna's school uniform. Lieutenant Morales of the Threat Assessment Division was already waiting in the corridor, 2 detectives behind him. He spoke quickly, no wasted words. "We've traced the image metadata. Taken yesterday outside Anna's school, 8:12 a.m. Whoever sent it has eyes on her. We're tightening perimeter security, but you need to get her out of sight." Donovan's voice was gravel. "Do it. Tonight." But before Morales could answer, a security officer jogged up, breathless. "Sir, we've got movement on the internal feeds. Stairwell C, sublevel 2. A man slipped past the lobby during the press exodus. Camera caught him heading up." Margaret's eyes widened. "Up? Toward the executive floors?" "Toward here," the guard confirmed. The air in the corridor snapped taut. Morales barked orders into his radio. "Seal the elevators. Sweep stairwells B and D. Lock down the building. Nobody in or out without my clearance." Donovan felt the shift in his gut. This wasn't just noise. The threat had already breached his walls. Stairwell C was dim, lit only by a strip of fluorescence that buzzed and flickered. The cameras caught him first. A man in a maintenance jacket, cap pulled low, a duffel bag slung at his side. His steps were quick but measured, climbing without hesitation. Margaret leaned over the security console, watching the grainy feed. Whoever he is, he knows the building's blind spots. Donovan clenched his fists. Not by accident. On the 12th floor, Anna had been brought to the private lounge, crayons scattered on the coffee table. A young security officer stood watch by the door, his hand never leaving the holster at his hip. Anna looked up from her drawing, sensing the tension in the room. "Where's Daddy?" she asked quietly. Margaret crouched beside her, forcing a smile. "He's here. He's making sure everything's safe. Keep drawing for me, sweetheart. Draw the biggest sun you can." The stairwell door banged open on the 13th floor. Morales and 2 detectives swung their weapons up, flashlights slicing through the dim. "Police! Drop the bag!" The man froze halfway up the landing. Slowly, he lifted one hand, the duffel bag hanging from the other. His voice was low, almost calm. "I'm not here for you." "On the ground!" Morales barked. The man didn't move. He tilted his head toward the hallway that led to the private lounge. "You've made powerful enemies, Mr. Blackwell. They don't care how. Only that she's silenced." Donovan's blood turned to fire. He stepped forward before Morales could stop him. "You look at me," he growled. "Not at her." The intruder's mouth curled faintly. "I was told to deliver a message, not a bullet." "Then drop the bag," Morales demanded. The man hesitated, then let the duffel thud to the floor. The sound echoed, metallic. One detective kicked it open. Inside lay a stack of manila folders, contracts stamped with Blackwell Bank letterheads, but redacted and warped, doctored to look incriminating. Margaret's breath caught. "Forgeries. They wanted to plant them." "Frame job," Morales muttered. "Take him." The man didn't resist as they cuffed him, but as he was dragged past Donovan, he leaned close enough for only one man to hear. "This is only the stairwell, Blackwell. The rooftop's next, and you don't control the wind." Half an hour later, the building was in full lockdown. Reporters outside clamored as news helicopters circled. Donovan stood in the lounge doorway, watching Anna scribble yellow suns across her page, blissfully unaware of how close the storm had come. Margaret joined him, voice hushed. "That was no lone wolf. He knew too much. Moved too easily." Donovan nodded, jaw set, which means someone inside fed him the map. Morales stepped up, holding a sealed evidence bag with the duffel contents. We'll trace the paper, the ink, the chain, but he's right about one thing. This isn't the end. It's escalation. Donovan looked back at his daughter, then out the window toward the restless city. The stairwell was just the first strike. They had tested his defenses, probed his resolve, but they had also shown their hand. They want to break me with fear, Donovan said softly. Instead, they've given me clarity. No more defense. From here on, offense. He closed the lounge door gently, sealing Anna's laughter inside, and turned toward the waiting storm. The city did not sleep after the stairwell incident. By dawn, every major outlet splashed headlines across their sites. Blackwell Tower lockdown. Intruder caught with leaked files. Who is behind the assault on Blackwell's legacy? Talk show hosts speculated, pundits shouted. And in the center of it all, Donovan Blackwell sat in his office with the curtains drawn, staring at the duffel bag now cataloged and sealed by police. The man in the stairwell had been processed. No ID, no priors, fingerprints burned off. But the forged documents inside the bag were precise, frighteningly so. They mirrored contracts Donovan himself had signed years ago, only doctored to suggest bribes and kickbacks. Someone with inside access had crafted them. And that meant betrayal. Margaret entered with 2 cups of coffee, her eyes bloodshot from a night without rest. Morales is downstairs coordinating with the forensics team. They'll run ink analysis, watermark checks. But Donovan, I know. He didn't lift his gaze. They came from here. From someone in this tower. She set the coffee down gently. We've already narrowed it. Legal archives were accessed at 2:14 a.m. last week. 1 badge, Richard Hayes' executive assistant, Paul Lanning. Donovan finally looked up. Paul? Margaret nodded grimly. He's been with Hayes for years, clean record. But logs don't lie. He pulled files he had no business touching, and 2 days later, poof, forgeries in a stranger's bag. Donovan's chest tightened. He had known Paul Lanning as courteous, almost invisible, precisely the kind of man you didn't notice until he was gone. Later that morning, the board convened in an emergency session. Hayes sat at the head of the table, shoulders squared, his tone defensive from the start. This paranoia has gone far enough. A trespasser waves around forged papers and suddenly we're hunting traitors? I won't have witch hunts in this institution. Patel leaned forward. This wasn't theater. Someone fed him those files. The metadata will confirm it. We need a full internal review. Devices, emails, badge access. Hayes slammed a fist on the table. And what happens when leaks about our so-called review hit the press? You'll hand them a narrative of collapse. Investors will bolt. Donovan's voice cut through. They already have the narrative, Richard. What they don't have is the truth. And if we don't find it ourselves, someone else will. Hayes sneered. Convenient, isn't it? Every crisis somehow reinforces your crusade for reform. Almost as if you welcome them. Donovan's jaw flexed, but before he could answer, the boardroom door opened. Morales entered, carrying a folder. Apologies for the intrusion, but this couldn't wait. He set the folder on the table and flipped it open. Forensic Trace links the forged documents directly to scans pulled from Blackwell's own archives. Badge ID confirms Paul Lanning. The room buzzed with shock. Hayes' face flushed, a dangerous crimson. That's absurd. Paul would never— He already did, Morales interrupted. We've detained him for questioning, and we recovered encrypted messages routed through a proxy in Zurich, payments tied to an account controlled by— He paused deliberately. Victor Marrero. Gasps erupted. Victor, already in custody, had become the linchpin. Hayes's hands trembled on the table. "You're framing my assistant to protect your narrative." Donovan leaned forward, voice steady as a blade. "Or perhaps, Richard, your assistant was never loyal to you at all. Perhaps he served whoever promised the bigger reward. The question is, did he act alone?" The boardroom stilled. Everyone knew what Donovan was implying. Hours later, in an interrogation room 2 floors below, Donovan watched through one-way glass as Paul Lanning sat with his hands folded, expression blank. Morales paced behind him. "You pulled files you shouldn't have. You transmitted them offshore. You fed doctored versions to a man caught trespassing in this building. Who are you working for?" Paul shrugged. "I work for the bank." Morales slammed a photo onto the table, the blurred shot of Anna's school uniform. "You know what this is?" Paul's mask cracked for a fraction of a second. His lips pressed tighter, then relaxed again. "Children should be left out of business," he said softly. From behind the glass, Donovan's nails bit into his palm. He wanted to storm in, wanted to crush the smugness out of the man's face, but Margaret's hand on his arm held him back. "Control," she whispered, "not rage." Paul's voice carried on, calm, deliberate. "You think you're fighting corruption, Mr. Blackwell. You're fighting an economy, one that feeds on power bigger than you. The men I answer to don't sit in your boardroom. They don't sign their names. They don't bleed when you cut." Morales leaned closer. "Then give me a name." Paul smiled faintly. "Names are for men who expect to die. My employers don't." That night, Donovan sat in his study, Anna asleep upstairs, the city's lights flickering like nervous eyes. Margaret stood at the window, phone in hand. "They'll paint this as inside betrayal," she said. "And they'll be right. But the larger war, they want you distracted with traitors while they build something darker." Donovan rubbed his temples. "The man with 2 faces," he murmured. Margaret turned. "What do you mean?" "Paul, Victor, Hayes, every one of them wearing one face for me, another for the men behind the curtain. And as long as I can't tear the mask off, they'll keep playing both sides." He looked up, eyes steel gray with exhaustion but sharper than ever. "Then we stop looking for faces. We look for shadows. Shadows don't lie." Margaret nodded slowly. "And when you find the man behind both faces?" Donovan's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a vow. "Then the masks will burn." The rain had only just stopped when Donovan received the call that made his chest turn hollow. "Mr. Blackwell," said the nurse's voice, trembling through the line. "Your daughter. She collapsed during recess. We've admitted her to St. Luke's. Please come at once." The phone nearly slipped from his grip. Anna, his compass, his reason, gone pale on a playground? For a moment the world blurred, as though someone had smeared gray across every pane of glass in his office. He was already running for the elevator before the nurse finished. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and urgency. Donovan burst through the double doors of the pediatric wing with Margaret at his heels. His protective detail cleared a path, but it felt like walking through water, slow, heavy, unbearable. Then came the words that froze him. Code Blue. Pediatrics. Room 317. A voice on the intercom. His daughter's room. The hallway erupted into chaos. Nurses sprinted. A crash cart rattled against tile, and Donovan, for the first time in decades, felt utterly powerless. He reached the door just as staff swarmed Anna's bed. She was small and still, monitors shrieking as gloved hands moved with terrifying precision. Electrodes. Oxygen mask. Chest compressions. "Daddy!" Anna's voice was no louder than a whisper under the mask. Her teddy bear tumbled from her arm as a nurse pushed Donovan back. "You can't be in here!" shouted the charge nurse. But Donovan's roar cracked like thunder. "She is my daughter!" Dr. Reyes, the attending physician, looked up just long enough to meet his eyes. "If you want her to live, let us work." The words hit like a blow. Donovan's fists clenched, but Margaret's grip anchored him. "Donovan," she whispered, "trust them." He staggered back, chest heaving as the team worked. The monitor beeped, then steadied, then shrieked again. A nurse called out numbers. Another prepared epinephrine. And then, silence. A terrible, aching silence before the machine caught rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Anna's chest rose under the mask. Color crept faintly back into her cheeks. "Stabilized," Dr. Reyes said, exhaling. "Possible arrhythmia. We'll transfer her to cardiology for a full workup." Donovan nearly collapsed against the doorframe. Hours later, in the dim hush of the cardiac unit, Anna slept under soft blankets, her teddy bear tucked safely at her side. Donovan sat beside her, head bowed, one hand wrapped gently around her small fingers. Margaret entered quietly with Dr. Reyes. "She's stable," the doctor said. "We're running tests. It may be stress-induced syncope, but given her age, we won't rule out structural concerns until the echocardiogram is complete." Donovan nodded, eyes never leaving his daughter. "Mr. Blackwell," Reyes continued carefully, "stress is a factor we can't ignore. Your daughter's world has been very public these past weeks. Children don't always show the weight until their bodies give out." Donovan's throat tightened. His fight with enemies, his crusade for dignity, had Anna carried the cost? When the doctor left, Margaret pulled a chair closer. "They're trying to break you, Donovan," she said softly. "If they can't do it with forged documents or fake tapes, they'll do it through fear, through her." He nodded slowly. "They want me to choose between reform and my child." He looked down at Anna's fragile hand in his. "But they don't understand. She is the reform. Everything I'm doing, it's for her." Near midnight, Morales arrived, his coat dripping from fresh rain. He set a folder on the windowsill. "Security footage confirms it," he said grimly. "The same sedan that circled your house tailed Anna's school bus this morning. We're not calling this a coincidence." Donovan's jaw hardened. "Enough shadows. I want names." "We're close," Morales said, "but understand the closer we get, the more desperate they'll become." Donovan looked at his sleeping daughter. Her chest rose and fell gently now, each breath a quiet miracle. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "They've thrown forged papers at me," he said quietly. "They've manufactured my voice. They've turned allies into traitors. But this, threatening a child, touching her life, this is the line." Margaret met his eyes. "Then what happens now?" Donovan stood slowly, the fatigue in his body burning into resolve. "Now," he said, "the hunt begins. And when we find the man with two faces, he'll be forced to stand in the light." The night after Anna's collapse, Donovan didn't return to his penthouse. He remained at the hospital, in a chair pulled up beside her bed, his hand resting lightly on hers. Every beep of the monitor was a reminder. The fight was no longer abstract, no longer about headlines or shareholder meetings. It was about survival, hers, and the dignity of countless others she had unknowingly come to represent. Margaret sat opposite him, reviewing files under the soft glow of the bedside lamp. She looked up eventually, her voice low. "There's something you should see." From her folder, she pulled a sealed envelope, aged and slightly yellowed. Across the top, written in a neat hand, were the words, "For Donovan Blackwell, when the storm comes." Donovan frowned. "Where did you get this?" It was found among Robert's effects, Margaret said. His attorney sent it. He said Robert instructed it not to be opened until the day Donovan needs it most. Robert. Donovan's older brother. The man who had built the first stones of Blackwell Bank with him, who had died too soon. The memory was raw even now. His hands shook slightly as he broke the seal. Inside was a letter, and beneath it, a series of documents. The letter. Donovan. If you are reading this, then the world has turned against you. I know you. I know you will not bow, but I also know your pride will tempt you to fight alone. Don't. You cannot fight shadows with shadows. You must fight them with light. Enclosed is the framework for the reform we always talked about but never enacted. Dignity first. Respect before wealth. I lacked the courage to push it through. You will not. When they come for you, and they will, this is your weapon. Build it into the bank. Make it law, not suggestion. Do not forget, our name is not marble or glass. It is trust. Protect that, and the rest will follow. Robert Donovan's eyes blurred as he finished reading. His brother's handwriting, steady and precise, cut through years of silence. He unfolded the attached documents, a proposed code of ethics, staff training modules, policy outlines for whistleblower protection, and cultural audits. It was a blueprint, written long before hashtags and scandals forced the issue. Margaret leaned forward. He knew. Maybe not the exact shape of this crisis, but he knew the rot could come, and he prepared you for it. Donovan exhaled, the weight of memory pressing on his chest. Robert, who had died believing he had left unfinished work. Robert, who had whispered in his hospital bed, "Promise me the bank won't become just numbers." "This," Donovan murmured, "this is his legacy." Margaret nodded. "Then let's use it." The next morning, Donovan called a special session, not in the marble boardroom but in the hospital conference center, still in the same building where Anna recovered. Reporters were barred. This was for the directors, the regulators, the staff leaders who would have to carry reform into daily life. He stood at the head of the table, Robert's letter in hand. "My brother foresaw this moment," he began. "Years ago he drafted the policies you see before you. Training, independent audits, whistleblower protections, standards of dignity. He called it dignity first. I ignored it then, too consumed with expansion and competition. That was my failure, but I will not ignore it now." He laid the papers down, one by one, like placing bricks. "This will not be a token gesture. This will be policy. It will be enforceable. It will be measured. It will be binding." Patel, the compliance director, leaned in, eyes widening as she scanned the drafts. "This is comprehensive. It's years ahead of current regulatory frameworks." "Robert was always ahead," Donovan said quietly. But across the table, Hayes scoffed. "So now we govern a bank by ghost-written ideals? What happens when profits fall, Donovan? Will your brother's letter comfort the shareholders?" Donovan's gaze snapped to him, steel against stone. "What will comfort shareholders when they see their wealth crumble under scandal, Richard? Because that is the path you've chosen, protecting numbers while trust evaporates." The room stilled. The battle lines were drawn again, but this time Donovan carried not only his will, but his brother's voice echoing through the ink of a letter. When the meeting adjourned, Margaret found Donovan in the hospital chapel, a small, dim place where votive candles flickered. He sat in silence, Robert's letter folded in his hand. "You look like him when you sit like that," Margaret said softly. Donovan half smiled, weary. He carried Faith better than I ever could. "You're carrying his legacy," she replied. "That's faith enough." He looked up at the cross on the wall, then back down at the folded paper. "This isn't just about Anna anymore. It never was. It's about every person who has walked into our halls and been told they didn't matter. Robert saw that before I did. Now I see it clearly." He rose, pocketing the letter. "It's time the bank saw it too." That night, Anna stirred awake, her small voice calling, "Daddy?" Donovan was instantly at her side. She blinked at him sleepily. "Are we safe?" "Yes," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Safer than ever." She reached for her teddy, then for his hand. "Did you fix it yet?" Donovan smiled faintly. "Not yet. But your Uncle Robert left me instructions." "And I'm going to follow them." Anna nodded, half asleep again. "Good, because respect has a C." Her words made him laugh softly through the ache in his chest. Respect has a C. And Robert's letter had the rest. The storm that had stalked Donovan Blackwell's empire for weeks finally broke into open court. What had begun as whispers in marble lobbies and forged files in stairwells now hardened into indictments and subpoenas. The Attorney General's office announced sweeping hearings into Blackwell Bank's culture, its governance, and, by extension, the man at its helm. The courthouse on Center Street became the arena. Outside, barricades strained under the press of protesters and reporters. Some waved signs that read, "Respect over wealth." Others jeered Donovan as a hypocrite. Television trucks lined the block, their satellite dishes angled skyward. Inside, the marble corridors hummed with tension, every step echoing like a drum. When Donovan entered the chamber, accompanied by Margaret and his legal counsel, the gallery exploded in flashes. He wore a simple navy suit, no theatrics, just the gravity of a man stepping into fire. Anna was at home under watchful protection, but in his inner pocket, Donovan carried her drawing. The circle of smiling figures beneath an oversized sun. Judge Morrison, stern and silver-haired, raised her gavel. "This court convenes to examine allegations of systemic misconduct, retaliation, and fraudulent concealment tied to Blackwell Bank. Truth will not be managed here. It will be spoken." The prosecution struck first. Assistant Attorney General Carla Vance laid out her case with precision. This is not about one lobby humiliation. This is about decades of cruelty, mockery at teller windows, discrimination in loan approvals, the silencing of whistleblowers. And when the light threatened to shine, what did Blackwell Bank deliver? Forged documents, fake audio tapes, stalking of a child. The gallery gasped. Vance called her first witness, Paul Lanning, shackled, diminished, his voice quavered as he admitted, "Yes, I accessed files. Yes, I passed them to intermediaries tied to Victor Marrero. I thought if enough mud stuck, Mr. Blackwell would fall with it." "Did Mr. Blackwell order you to do any of this?" Vance pressed. "No," Paul admitted, glancing toward Donovan. "He didn't know, but I believed he'd go down anyway." Next came forensic audio experts, screens lit up with colorful spectrograms. They explained how the infamous Barriott, profit comes first, recording bore signs of splicing, mismatched ENF traces, and tampered metadata. The science was irrefutable. The tape was fake. But Vance twisted the knife. Even if the words were fabricated, do they not resonate because the culture itself is rotten? That question lingered like smoke. When Donovan took the stand, the room hushed. He placed Robert's weathered letter in front of him but did not read it aloud. Instead, he spoke with the weight of it in his voice. "For decades, I believed profit justified pressure. My brother warned me that respect must come before wealth. I ignored him. That failure allowed men like Victor and Paul to exploit cracks, to weaponize cruelty. I stand here not to deny my blindness, but to correct it. You admit Blackwell Bank tolerated misconduct? Vance asked. Yes, Donovan said without hesitation. And I admit I did not act soon enough. But the reforms are real. Dignity First is not a slogan. It is policy, binding in every hall of this institution. Why should this court believe you? Donovan reached into his jacket and unfolded Anna's drawing. He set it on the evidence stand, the crayon sun bright against the oak. Because this is my witness. A 6-year-old who walked into a bank and was mocked. I cannot erase that day, but I can build a future where no child, no elder, no stranger suffers the same. This drawing is not innocence, it is indictment, and it is my mandate. Emotion rippled through the gallery, reporters shifting uncomfortably, spectators brushing at wet eyes. Then Margaret stepped forward with new evidence from the independent audit. Internal emails projected on the screen revealed Richard Hayes had written, "If reform is inevitable, let Donovan fall on the sword. Better him than shareholder value." The gallery erupted. Hayes stood, shouting, "Out of context!" But his face flushed crimson as the gavel cracked for silence. Under cross-examination, Hayes admitted he knew Paul Lanning had accessed files without clearance. His attempts to downplay it only deepened suspicion. Judge Morrison leaned forward. "This court will consider charges of breach of fiduciary duty. Mr. Hayes, your credibility is fractured." The air shifted. For weeks, Donovan had been the target. Now the glare turned toward those who had plotted behind him. Closing arguments drew the lines clearly. The prosecution painted a culture of arrogance. The defense countered with transparency, audits, and reforms already underway. Donovan's lawyer concluded, "This is not the trial of a single man. It is the trial of a system. The question is not whether shadows existed. They did. The question is, who brought light?" When the judge adjourned, the verdict was not yet written in law, but the judgment of public opinion had already tilted. Donovan walked down the courthouse steps into the crush of cameras, raising his head high. "The trial is not mine alone," he said into the microphones. "It belongs to every customer who has been silenced, every worker mocked, every voice buried. The verdict will come, but our work has already begun." Behind him, Margaret whispered, "Robert would be proud." Donovan touched the folded letter in his pocket and Anna's drawing in his hand. For the first time, he believed it. The trial stretched on for weeks, winding through testimony, depositions, and expert reports. But something irreversible had already happened. The tide of public trust had begun to shift. Not because Donovan Blackwell was perfect, he had admitted he was not, but because he had faced shadows with light. On a pale winter morning, the Fifth Avenue branch of Blackwell Bank opened its doors under a different kind of attention. There were no reporters pressing at the glass, no hostile crowds with placards. Instead, there were families, retirees, small business owners. And in the center of it all, one small girl clutching a teddy bear and holding her father's hand. Anna wore her blue dress again, the one she had chosen for the town hall, and her shoes tapped lightly against the marble floor. This time, she did not tremble. Employees lined the counters. They did not smirk. They did not whisper. One teller, a woman with tired eyes and careful hands, stepped forward and bent down until her gaze was level with Anna's. "Good morning, Miss Blackwell," she said softly. "Welcome back." Anna blinked, then smiled. "Good morning." Margaret guided them toward the counter. Anna set her teddy on the polished wood as if it were a co-signer. The teller slid a small green-bound passbook across the counter, embossed in silver letters. Respect over wealth. Anna touched it with both hands, reverent. "Now I have my own," she whispered. Yes, Donovan said, voice thick with emotion. And no one will ever tell you otherwise again. The lobby stirred with quiet applause, not staged, not forced, simply human. Later that afternoon, in a modest boardroom stripped of grandeur, Donovan gathered employees, community leaders, and regulators. There were no chandeliers, no stock tickers, just a circle of chairs and a stack of documents stamped with the seal of the Respect Over Wealth Fund. He stood with Robert's letter in one hand and Anna's drawing in the other. Today we begin restitution, not charity, justice. Scholarships for children who dream of school but lack means. Financial literacy workshops in neighborhoods long ignored. A hotline for customers and employees to report abuse without fear. Dignity is not a slogan. It is our contract. A retired teacher raised her hand. Why should we believe you now, when so many promises have been broken before? Donovan looked at Anna, who sat with her teddy and crayons at the end of the table. Because this time, my daughter is watching, and she is not the only child. If we fail them, every marble column in this city will crumble. But if we succeed, perhaps they'll grow up never knowing what it felt like to be mocked for simply standing at a counter. Silence followed, deep and steady. Then the teacher nodded, and one by one, others did too. Weeks passed, and reforms began to take shape. Training rooms filled with employees learning to greet not just accounts, but people. Posters appeared in branches, worth equals respect. Mystery audits caught lapses. Managers corrected them swiftly. Slowly, the culture shifted. Not overnight, but like rain shaping stone. At the fund's launch gala, Donovan did not invite hedge fund titans. He invited Eleanor, the widow who had spoken at the town hall of being laughed at 20 years earlier. She sat beside Anna in the front row, her weathered hands folded. When Donovan named her as the fund's first honoree, applause thundered. Eleanor's voice shook as she said, I thought I was invisible. Tonight, I am not. Anna slipped her hand into Eleanor's, and the cameras caught it. 2 generations joined, a symbol stronger than any slogan. Months later in his study, Donovan opened a letter written in shaky script. Dear Mr. Blackwell, I came to your bank years ago and left ashamed. Yesterday I returned. They listened. They smiled. They called me by name. I left with more than money. I left with dignity. Thank you. Eleanor. Donovan folded it carefully. Margaret, entering with tea, asked, Good letter? The best, he whispered. Upstairs, Anna's laughter drifted down the hall. She was teaching her teddy how to balance a pretend checkbook, scolding it when it forgot to carry the 1. Donovan smiled, feeling peace where once there had been only battle. Respect over wealth. That was the legacy. Thank you for staying with us through this journey of courage and healing. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and join us, because together we can build a world where respect is worth more than wealth.